Hello friends, now we are going to cover third strategy in Hibernate inheritance mapping. The third strategy is table per subclass. Again we are having two approach, table per subclass using XML file and table per subclass using annotation. We'll see both approach one by one. If you remember, in a first strategy, that is table per hierarchy, we have used discriminator column. In a second strategy, table per concrete subclass, we have used union subclass element. Same way over here, in a table per subclass, we are going to create or use join subclass element. How? Let us see once. Now in this particular strategy, the subclass, as you can see over here, the statement, in case of table per subclass mapped table are related to parent class mapped table by primary key and foreign key relationship. It means that we are going to cover the subclass table which is related to the superclass table. So in this approach also will be having superclass table, but this table will not be used. Now this table primary key will be used as a foreign key in a subclass. Let us see how. So the join subclass element of a class is used to map the child class with the parent. Again we'll using the same example, employee, regular employee and contract based employee. Employee having two fields, ID and name. Regular employee having two more fields, salary and bonus, and contract employee having paper hour and contract period. Now let us see what changes will be there in your Hibernate mapping file. This Hibernate mapping file will not be used in a annotation, but as we are using the approach using XML, so this file is important one. Now in this file, the first element is Hibernate mapping. In that, again a class which is representing your superclass employee. The table name is related with the table is EMP123. This is its primary key. The increment used as a generator, and the rest of the fields, like it's having only one field, that is name. Now within the class tag, join subclass tag will be used. In a join subclass, the regular employee is the subclass which will represent a table name regular employee 123. This is the important one. Rather than overriding all attributes of a superclass into the subclass, they will be used foreign key. A primary key of the superclass will be act as a foreign key in a subclass. So key will be act as a column name employee ID, and then salary and bonus will be used as a private fields of this regular employee class. Complete this join subclass tag. Again create join subclass tag for the another subclass, that is contract employee. Again individual table for it, contract employee 123. Then key will be act as a foreign key, employee ID, the rest of its private fields, paper hour and contract duration, and complete this join subclass tag. Once you complete this tag, complete class tag and complete Hibernate mapping tag. So this is how the Hibernate mapping file will be useful. Okay, now you can see over here the join subclass sub element of a class specifies the subclass, and the key sub element of a join subclass is used to generate the foreign key in the subclass map table. This foreign key will be associated with the primary key of the parent class. So as I have already told you that the primary key of a parent class will be used as a foreign key in a subclass. The structure for each table would be look like this. This is the superclass. It has its private member ID and name. Again ID is the primary key, so nullable value is not accepted. In a regular employee, it has its two private fields, salary and bonus, and extra field as a foreign key, employee ID. Again it's a foreign key, so nullable value is not accepted. The reason is this field will be act as a primary key in a superclass. Same way for the contract based employee, employee ID and its private field paper hour and contract duration. So this is how the entire table structure will look like. Now let us see its example first. So as we all know that if you want to create the example using XML file, 4 steps are required. Create the persistent class, then create the Hibernate mapping file, then create the configuration file, and then the file which access its database. So class that store the persistent object. Fine, let us see one by one. So the first thing is create the persistent class. As you all know that to create a persistent class we have 3 classes: employee.java, regular employee.java, and contract employee.java. So employee.java, this is the field ID and name, then getter setter method. Regular employee, its private field salary and bonus, and getter and setter method. And contract employee.java, paper hour, string, contract duration. So this is how you can create the persistent class. It is accepted, or you can say that it is required to create a bean class if you are going to use any of the persistent class. If you can remember the Java bean class object, that means it should have a private members, it should not have any kind of like non-argument constructor, then getter and setter method is required, and implement serializable. So this all things are important for a Java bean class. Now let us see creating the mapping file for the persistent class, which we have already seen. Hibernate mapping, a class with a table employee 123 and its member primary key ID, complete the stack, and its field property. Now in a join subclass, which is a sub element of a class which will represent a subclass, regular employee having 123 as a table name, this is its key, foreign key, and rest of the field. Same way for the another subclass. You can see over here, complete your class tag, complete your Hibernate mapping tag. So this is your Hibernate mapping file. The name of this file is superclassname.hbm.xml. So it's employee.hbm.xml. Now let us see the configuration file. It is as it is. You just have to use the mapping file in it. So Hibernate configuration tag, the name of this file is Hibernate cfg.xml. Hibernate configuration tag, within that it's a session factory tag, and within the session factory tag all the database property, and most important thing is mapping resource file. Okay, then complete your session factory tag, then complete Hibernate configuration tag. And the last one is now hbm to dll.auto property is actually most important over here to create automatic table. Now create the class which will store the persistent object. So again create one class which will store the data. Create your session object using session factory and the configuration object, and create your transaction object using session object, which we have already seen, session.begin transaction and transaction object t. Once the object is created, transaction object is created, you can create the persistent class object, employee e1, regular employee e2, and contract based employee e3, and sets its property like set name. Over here set name, set salary, and set bonus, and over here set names, set paper hour, and set contract duration. Then persist your persist object, session.persist e1, e2, e3. Then complete your transaction like transaction commit, and then close the session object and appropriate message. So this is how you can create table per subclass using XML file. Most important thing, it's table structure. So in a table structure, rather than overridden attribute, you will be having foreign key, employee ID, same way over here employee ID. Okay, so we have already seen table per subclass using XML file. Now let us see the another approach that is table per subclass using annotation. In a table per subclass using annotation, we are going to eliminate Hibernate configuration file. So as we are not using Hibernate configuration file, but we must have to involve certain annotation in a persistent class. So the one annotation inheritance type is used in a parent class, and another annotation, that is primary key join column, will be used in a subclass. So for the same example, we'll see the entire approach. So the table structure will be as it is. In a employee class, ID and name are the two fields. In a regular employee, salary and bonus, and one more foreign key, that is employee ID. And same way for the contract based employee. Let us see the program. So first step is create the persistent class. In a persistent class, this is the super class employee.java, which will be having this kind of annotation. @entity will represent it's a class, @table will represent a table related to this class, and @inheritance type is join will be act as a annotation in a superclass only. Then this is the simple class employee, and its ID field, its ID itself, the generator is used as auto, and rest of the fields like this, private string name, and the column name is name. Then rest of the methods like getter and setter methods. In a subclass, regular employee.java, @entity represent the class, @table represent the table associated with it, and this is the important annotation field, primary key join column, and the name is ID, which will represent that the superclass primary key will be act as a foreign key in this class. So rest of the fields, and don't forget to extend the employee. Same way for the contract based employee, @entity represent the class, table is represented by @table, and as it is again a subclass, so primary key join column is ID, and extend the employee and its private members, and then getter and setter method. So this is how you can create the persistent class. So first step is completed. Now we are not going to create any kind of Hibernate mapping file, but we require to include the configuration file. The name of the configuration file is common hibernate.cfg.xml, and rather than using mapping file as a resource, we are going to use individual class file into the configuration file. So this is the configuration file, this is the configuration tag, this is the session factory tag, which will represent the entire property of your database, and this 3 line of code which represent mapping of individual class, mapping employee class, contract employee class, and regular employee class. Complete your session factory tag and complete your Hibernate configuration tag. So your configuration file is completed. Now create the class which stores the persistent object. So it is as it is. Create one file, store data, in which we are going to create a transaction object. To create transaction object, we require a session object. To create session object, we require session factory object, and for the same we require configuration object. As it is annotation configuration, so we require annotation configuration object rather than simple configuration. Then create session object via this method, and then create transaction object using begin transaction method of a session class. So now you have a transaction object. Create the employee object. This is the persistent class object. Again, second persistent class object employee E2, and contract based employee E3. Set its respective properties: set name, salary and set bonus, set name, paper hour, and contract duration for E3. Then persist all your persist object. So session.persist E1, E2, and E3. Commit your transaction, close the session, and display the appropriate message. So this is very simple. This is how we have done with the table per subclass using annotation. So this is the last strategy. So that's all about Hibernate inheritance mapping.